Hey everyone, ready to get knee-deep in some bee business. Our listeners sent in a whole bunch of research on honeybees. Really cool stuff.
Yeah, I was impressed. We've got a great overview from Michigan State University Extension to start us off.
Perfect for context, right?
Exactly. And then it gets even juicier. They included these in-depth studies on what goes on inside the hive, like actual bee surveillance.
Big brother bee. No, but seriously, hidden cameras catching all this bee behavior, I had no idea how much we could even learn that way.
It's wild. The paper on honeybee behaviors within the hive blew me away. It's like we're finally seeing their day-to-day in a whole new light, literally.
Before we jump into the juicy details, though, can you set the stage a bit? How is this continuous video research different from what we could do before?
Good point. You see, in the past, we were mostly stuck with these short observations, like pop in, see what the bees are up to, pop back out.
Yeah.
Not exactly a full picture, right?
Right, and I imagine trying to get a bee to sit still for a portrait session is difficult.
Precisely. Or we'd have these specially designed hives for observation, but those could end up changing the bee's natural behavior. The camera changes everything.
Fascinating. So what were some of the biggest surprises they caught on camera? Because I gotta say, reading through this, I had more than a few, wait, really, moments.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
One that stands out is this whole thing about worker bees tipping eggs.
Yeah, like they delicately nudge them to help with development.
Right, exactly. That's what we always thought, assumed it was this deliberate thing. Well, it turns out not so much. After watching hours and hours of footage, these researchers never once saw a bee deliberately tip an egg. Not once.
Not a single tip. Seems it's actually all the constant movement for thermoregulation. Basically, those busy bees are just bumping into the eggs as they go about their day.
So much for our graceful bee midwives. I love it. It's a good reminder that their world is way more complex and probably way weirder than we imagine.
100%. And speaking of weird and wonderful, ever heard of a bee building with a wax string?
A wax string? That sounds like something you'd find on a beehive-themed craft store.
Right. But this is legit bee construction. The research described it as this non-transparent string-like material they pull from existing wax, like a super efficient repair kit.
So instead of waiting for new wax to build with, they just repurpose what they've got. Exactly. Quick repairs on the combs, sticking them to the observation hive. Talk about resourceful.
Okay, I need details. How does a bee even make a wax string, let alone use it?
Picture this. Rapid fire, head bobbing, while they're extending this string out from their mandibles. It's pretty metal when you think about it.
Head-banging bees. Okay, you gotta admit that's a visual.
And it shows how precise their movements are, especially when you realize they're using their mouths and legs to handle these tiny materials.
Okay, but hold on to your hive tools, folks, because it gets even better. They also caught the larvae doing these crazy somersaults while they're spinning their cocoons.
Ah, yes, the longitudinal turns. And
Yeah.
get this, on average, they spin about 57 times.
57. I can barely manage one graceful twirl, and these little larvae are out here putting dancers to shame. But seriously, even these tiny details.
They paint a picture, don't they?
Totally. It's like we're right there with them, experiencing the hive as they do.
And that's the beauty of this kind of in-depth observation. Every detail, no matter how small, adds to our understanding.
So we're not just learning about individual bees, but how all those individual actions, somersaulting larvae, head-banging builders, the accidental egg bumpers, it all works together, right?
Precisely. It's the whole hive that matters, and now, thanks to this research, we're finally seeing how those pieces fit together.
You know, it's funny how we're always classifying ourselves, right? Like, oh, he's a total introvert, she's such an extrovert. But this research got me thinking, are we so different from those busy bees after all?
I see where you're going with this. It's easy to think of a beehive as this perfectly uniform society, everyone working together, no room for individuality. But that's not the whole picture, is it?
Definitely not. The article you shared, behavioral variation across the days and lives of honeybees, that one really drove it home for me. Bees are more than just drones, you know?
Exactly. And it's not just some fun fact either. Turns out, this variation in individual bees, their personalities, if you will, it's essential for the colony's success.
Okay, I have to ask, are we talking grumpy bees and social butterflies here? How exactly do bee personalities play out?
Think of it more like their activity levels and how they adapt to different roles within the hive. You've got your explorer bees, always buzzing around, covering more ground. Those are usually your foragers, venturing further from the hive. Then you've got the homebodies content with those essential tasks inside the hive.
Wow. So we do have our introverted and extroverted bees. I knew it. But on a more serious note, do these different personalities actually change how the colony functions? Like, does it really matter?
It absolutely matters.
Yeah.
And it's not just about who's more likely to strike up a conversation at the water cooler or the flower patch, I guess.
Yeah.
The research actually found that those bees who transition through different roles very quickly.
Like going from cleaning duty to becoming a seasoned forager overnight.
Exactly. Those go-getters actually had shorter lifespans, like they were burning out faster. It's a trade-off, it seems.
Wow, so much for the early bird getting the worm, or the nectar in this case. But it makes sense, right? A hive full of workaholics probably wouldn't be sustainable in the long run. So how does this all tie back to the colony's overall well-being? Like, what's the takeaway here?
It's all about resilience. Think about it. If everyone reacts to change the same way, has the same skills, the whole colony becomes vulnerable.
Mm.
But with this diversity of personalities, you've got a much more adaptable system. A disease hits, a food source changes. They're better equipped to handle it.
So basically, those unique quirks and tendencies, the bee equivalent of being a homebody or a social butterfly, those are what help the colony as a whole to thrive.
Exactly. And isn't that fascinating that something we might consider individualistic actually contributes to the collective good? Makes you think, doesn't it?
It really does, especially when you start to draw parallels to our own societies, right? I mean, we're always talking about the importance of diversity, but this really puts things into perspective.
It's not just a human thing. It's fundamental, it seems. This idea that individual variation is crucial for the resilience of a system, whether it's a beehive or a human society.
It really makes you think twice, huh? Like all this time we've been looking at beehives and seeing, well, just a bunch of bees. But there's so much more going on under the surface.
That's the thing about science. Always more to uncover. It's humbling, really.
Humbling, yeah. And exciting. We've
Mm,
gotten to peek behind the curtain thanks to our listeners' research.
absolutely. A whole lot to be mindful of, even for those of us who don't spend our days buzzing around a hive.
Couldn't have said it better myself. To our listener, thank you for sharing this incredible deep dive with us. And to everyone else, until next time, keep those questions buzzing.